Here we are before Pesach and Tavshin Pei Dalid. As we all know, I'm sure people have spoken about the over 350 missiles that were flown from Persia. But people don't realize it wasn't just missiles, these were ballistic missiles that carried over 60 tons of Chomer Nefetz. I heard from inside information that they were actually preparing the hospitals and the doctors in order to be aware that Chas v'Shalom, even if one of them lands, the amount of damage and the catastrophe that could have caused, if Allah Aleinu, even one of them landed, would have been astronomical. And Baruch Hashem, as we know, Nisim and Iflot, as usual, the way we live in this country, Baruch Hashem, 99% were knocked down, as we're also familiar with. I wanted to speak out here a little bit about this idea of the Mechloket of the Milchama of Gog and Magog, which is, of course, seems to be very connected to what we're going through. Benisim Nigalu and Benisim Atidim Ligoel, and it seems to be that we were Zoche because of the schut of the Koch of Nisim, of Nisan, which is the Koch of Nisim, which is the Koch of miracles, which we are about to celebrate during Pesach. It's no coincidence that it has to do with the war that's in front of us and the lesson that we can learn from it. So here, let's just speak out a couple of the midrashim. First of all, we know in Breshit Rabbah Membet, it says, if you see that two of the biggest malchut are fighting one against the other, you should expect the Reglaim Mashiach, you should expect that Mashiach is on his way. As the Gemara in Megillah says, on Daf Zayin, Milchamat Atchalat de Geula. When there's Milchamat, as we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Oisa Milchamat. And the idea behind Milchamat sometimes is to make some type of, yes, catastrophe, but big changes in the world and what happens. So you'll tell me, yes, we've had many Milchamat in the world, and that's what happens, and even with superpowers, as we had in the previous wars. But you should know that it says before Shem Chazal in a number of places, the Malbim brings it in Yecheskel, Perek Lamed Chet, Zechariah, Yud Chet, and Yoel, Daf Perek Dalid. He brings a midrash, it's a midrash in Tehillim, and the Yalkut Tzimoni over there in Zechariah in the same place, Tav Tav Kuf Ayin Tet. It's midrashim all over the place, and Malbim says it over and over again when he discusses the Milchama of Gog and Magog. He says that you should know that it's a three-part war. There's three chalakim to this war. It's not going to be a one-time shot. It's going to happen in three strong instances. And it's Yedua that the Chavetz Chaim used to say, if you want to see, it's in the Leiv Eliyahu. That's Rav Eliyahu Lapian in the end of Parshat Yitro. He brings it down that he heard it from Rav Elchanan Wasserman, the Talmud of Chavetz Chaim, who the Chavetz Chaim himself told Rav Elchanan Wasserman these words, that right after the First World War, the Chavetz Chaim said this was the first step of Gog and Magog. He said in approximately another 25-30 years is going to be another big milchama that's going to make this First World War, what was known at the time as the Great War, look like silly putty. It'll look like a playland compared to what the Second World War is going to be like. That was the words of the Chavetz Chaim, which of course scared the Rabbi Chanan, and he said, what are we supposed to do? And he gives them another information. You can look over there in the Sefer, what's going to be in the Second World War. And the Chavetz Chaim told him, but then after that, after a number of years, there will be a third war, which will be bigger than the previous two wars, which will be very large. That's what he says. In Al Baal Peh, it is an imsar from a few of the Talmidim of the Chavetz Chaim that he said it would take 70 years. I never understood 100% what 70 years is, but I saw one of the Sfarim that they said the idea behind 70 years is 7 Shemitas. 7 Shemitas have to pass from the time of the Second World War. 10 Shemitas, each 7 years, which is the 70 years, 10 Shemitas, each one taking place of 7 years, and that will be the time where will be the final war, that will be the final destination when we'll be able to have the completion of Gog and Magog. So Hashem, it should not be too big, but guess what? The last Shemitah was 70 years from this time that completed from World War II. That was the last Shemitah that happened a couple years ago. If you calculate, it comes out, those were 10 Shemitahs that passed by. And now, after we've passed all these Shemitahs, and here we are in Motzei Shvit, and we are surrounded by what sounds to be the harbings of a tremendous war. Why? Persia is threatening to fight again. If Israel backs up, Israel has decided that they will attack back. They have to show some retaliation, because like I said, it wasn't stop missiles. People think it will stop missiles, and Baruch Hashem, things worked out all right. These were planes, literally planes, that were equipped with a tremendous amount of equipment, of explosives that could have destroyed crazy amount of things. As we all know, America might, hopefully, if they will, back up Israel. They're not necessarily saying they are. And Russia, of course, is backing Iran. So we're not talking about some child's play over here. We don't know the amount of damage that this can cause. And Zot Hashem, we know that we have the koach of the Kodesh Baruch Hu, Ein lanu lismoich el avinu shabashamayim. But at the same time, we have to remember that it all comes at the idea of knowing and being somech on HaKadosh Baruch Hu Echad. And yes, realizing that we are surrounded by Nisim, the more we think that it has to do with the power of the army, the power of the Kochei Ve'otzim Yadi, we don't see them as Shluchim, then we know that we're putting ourselves in trouble. The Vilna Gaon would say, Chavlei Mashiach, the Vilna Gaon, it says, Bran Maisarav, it says that Chavlei Mashiach will take 70 years. It will take 70 years. He says the Mahut of it will be the Erev Rav and the Hashpalat of Talmidei Chachamim. Every time they affect the Talmidei Chachamim, something bad happens in this country. Budik v'nimtza, now they just a week and a half ago, they ended up annulling any type of payment to the people who are in Talmidei Chachamim, the Avreichim, and here we have it, we're in the middle of very big danger. I just wanted to mention something specifically when it comes to Yishmael and Persia, because of course I'm sure we've heard many times about the idea of Yishmael, but listen to this. The Malbim writes, first of all, he writes, the first two wars will not take place in Eretz Yisrael. They will try to take place in Eretz Yisrael, he says, but it will not happen. I'm sure we are all so familiar that Hitler tried very hard to get into Eretz Yisrael. Everybody in Eretz Yisrael was prepped up for war, even though it was probably a losing battle if he would have gotten in here, but because of the Africa Corps, an absolute open miracle, actually stopped the Nazi resume, stopped the machine that nobody else was able to stop him, except for some reason. In North Africa, they were able to stop him, and he never actually made it to Eretz Yisrael, unbelievably so. Rav Sternbach writes in the Sefer Dam al Hashiv that he spoke to Rav Avramsky, that he is a Masorah from the Talmidim of the Gra, that the Milchama will take 12 minutes. It will destroy, it could be very destructive in 12 minutes, and nobody understood the Vilna Gaon, because they said, how in 12 minutes can you destroy 1/3 of the world? It's not physically possible. How can you do that? But guess what? The Vilna Gaon lived 250 years ago. Now we know the answer. The Vilna Gaon knew what he was predicting at the time that he was doing it, and of course we know how something like that could be of stake. The Pirkei de Rav Elazar, in the end of Perek Lamed, it says, Bnei Yishmael atidim la'asod me'uma be'eretz achriti yamim. In a time when nobody would have believed that we'd ever come back to Eretz Yisrael, the Perkei de Rav Elazar, yes, it was written 1800 years ago when we were out of Eretz Yisrael, we never thought we'd ever come back. It says that Bnei Yishmael, the Yishmael are going to cause us a lot of problems in Eretz Yisrael in the end of days. Shenemar ki mipnei charvot nadadu. Sounds like Charvot Bazel, the name of this war. Vein charvot ela milchamot. Those are the words of the Perkei de Rav Elazar. It's going to be only big wars. Aval misham yered ben David v'yovel Eretz Yisrael. But that will be the entranceway. That will be the way that we will come into Eretz Yisrael. Now here, what we're mitpoken on today is going to be the Gemara in Avodah Zarah and Daf Bet. Right in the beginning of Avodah Zarah over there, it brings how in the end of the days the different nations will come and say all the different things that we accomplished, all the different things we did, and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't get angry at us. And what's funny is that over there it says clearly that will be last, the final Malchut that will happen at the end will be Malchut Roimi. Roimi, of course, being the Malchut of Edom, which is the Malchut we're in. We know that the first Malchut had to do with Bavel, and then it was Paras, which is Persia. The third one is Madai, or the Greek. And the fourth one was the Romans, which was Edom. And of course, that's what we are surrounded by, the Western world, or Germany. That was the idea of Malchut Roimi. But then afterwards it says, Malchut Paras. Also, Malchut Paras, it says, comes even afterwards. And it's funny, it says that Malchut Roimi comes first and afterwards Malchut Paras, which doesn't make sense because Paras, Persia, was already the second Malchus. They were already put down by the Greeks. They were already finished. Why is the Gemara bringing that they will be ad Achrit Yamim? They will last till the end, and they will come with... and they will come with a ta'ana, they will come even at the end of the time of Mashiach. How could that be that they will be after Roimi? It doesn't make sense. So the Tosad Reed, which is one of the Rishonim, asks this question, and he answers that even though, yes, they completed their Malchut earlier, but that might have been the way they were sholet on Yerushalayim, but they will come back on Yerushalayim. They will come back to attack Eretz Yisrael. Even though they don't have any charge over Eretz Yisrael like they had back then, but it's a different Malchut. It's a different Malchut of Paras that will try to attack Eretz Yisrael, and they will be under the auspices of Yishmael. They will be under the name of Yishmael, which the Maharal writes in many places. The Maharal writes this over there in the Agadot, and he writes this in Netzach Yisrael Perek Chaf Aleph. For those who know how to check, it's Kedai to check Netzach Yisrael Perek Chaf Aleph. He writes clearly over there that Yishmael and Paras and Persia are one. The whole Islamic Koach underneath the auspices of Persia. Persia is the head of the snake that follows, and nothing can be accomplished in one until the head of the snake is stepped on and destroyed. Meaning they're the ones that tag along. As we know, Persia was the one who was in charge of all the Hamas and Hezbollah and the Taiman and all the problems that we're having with all terrorists, they are the head of the stake. They're the ones who are supporting them. They're the ones that deliver all the weaponry. They're the ones who are sneaking in everything. That is Persia, and it says Mefurish in the Maral. He writes how one comes after the other. He even writes over there that every country, every one of the Galiyot, like let's say Edom, and Madai and all of them come and speak out what they built. And when it says about Persia specifically, it says we made a lot of ksharim, krachim, and milchamot. We made many cities and many wars. Nobody else spoke about the fact that they made so many wars. They said, look how many wars we did. We did a l'tovat Yisrael k'biyochel. We're making wars because he says that epitome of Persia is a bear that comes to swallow up. They only care about swallowing up the world. They want everything from themselves. And he says clearly over there, Yishmael follows suit after that. They go hand in hand. These are the words of the Maharal that was written almost 600 years ago. That he wrote these words 550 years ago. That he wrote this Nevuah k'biyochel, that Paras and Yishmael go hand in hand, and Paras will be in the Achrit Yamim. They will be from amongst the list of the Milchama of Gog and Magog. The Malbim writes in Daniel, Paras Shayach li Yishmael b'Milchamet Gog and Magog. Because Yishmael also is a big chaya. He was also a problem, and he's not one of the four galiyot. But the answer is the end of the toes that are in the nevuah of Daniel. Daniel had a nevuah which made up of a pesel, of a certain image, which had four parts to it, but the very end, the tippy toes of it, was the image of Yishmael. That's what the Maharal writes, that's what the Malbim writes. And therefore we see that these nevuahs are mamish coming to fruition, which should be a point of appeasement. Says the Midrash Rabbah in Shir Hashirim, Chet Yud Gimel, Tani Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that if you see the horse hooves of the Persians in Eretz Yisrael, around the areas of Eretz Yisrael, or causing the Kvarim of Eretz Yisrael, causing the cemeteries of Eretz Yisrael, Tzafa l'raglav shel Mashiach. Those hooves are the beginnings of the hooves of Mashiach. You should realize that this is the beginning of Mashiach coming. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Sheparas Megillah Eretz Yisrael Elokta. Paras comes and tries to capture Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't say anything about him actually capturing it. It just says that he caused problems and nezik and tries to do as much as he can. And he'll use the surrounding territory in order to get to it. But it all comes from the same place of them coming to take over Eretz Yisrael and not being interested in Bnei Yisrael being in Eretz Yisrael. That's why he uses the words mana takulu parsim. These are the words that Daniel says the Vilna Gaon. Parsim, it's from Lashon Paras, to be split in half. And he says, yes, eventually they will be defeated. Paras will eventually be defeated over Rhine. We don't know how much damage lo aleinu they can cause, but Bezrat Hashem it shouldn't be any. But Al Kopanim, that's what it says over there based on the Vilna Gaon. The Tosas and Avodah Zarah also brings that eventually Rome will be able to take over, and to be able to take over for Yishmael and Persia that interleak one in the other. All this is not there to make it difficult for us or to make us depressed. Hanfuch is to make us excited, because the Rabbeinu Bechai writes specifically in Breshit, in Perek Yud Zayin, V'natativ l'goy gadol. Listen to the words of Rabbeinu Bechai, unbelievable. Talmid of the Ramban. He says that the Yishmaelim, the Arabs, received a promise from the Tativ l'goy gadol, and he says, look how patiently they waited. It took them over 2,333 years, he says, till this Nevuah came about. It took a long time, 2,300 years, because they weren't the biggest of the nations for a long time, and approximately 1,000 years ago or so, they started becoming an overpowering dominion, the Muslim dominion, which is underneath the auspices of Yishmael. They started becoming and being mitchazek, and he says it happened, as the Ramban writes also in Perek Bet, that it happened around in the years 5,000, where we have approximately 850 years ago or so. That's when they started becoming a superpower nation. They're becoming a tremendous amount in the amount that they are around them. Says the Rabbeinu Chaya, uncandidly of him, he says, so too we should not never give up, because we see the Nevuah comes to truth with Yishmael, so you should know, Kal V'chomer, eventually it will come to truth with us. And I will conclude with the words of Rabbi Yerucham, that he says, all these things may bring to you pachad yiyu shekedoyme. When we read about Gog and Magog, and when we hear the Mishnayot and Sota at the end about the difficulties that will happen in the end of days, And it might not be so simple, but he says that's what the Mishnah ends. Ein lanu lishon ela alavinu shabashamayim. And he says many people see it maybe as a curse, as an excuse, as something that's a yush, because what can we do? He says no. All this is leading to one and final resolution. That when all these things put us in a situation where there's a point of no return, when there's a point that we realize there's no one to be samech on, whether it's an army, whether it's a government, whether it's America, whether it's anything that surrounds us, with all their empty promises as we are so familiar with, and telling us to just lay off and let bygones be bygones. When all those things happen, then we realize that that will be the point when the Kadosh Baruch Hu will show his face. Kadosh Baruch Hu is waiting, that there's nowhere to turn right or left. We're not looking for a hope over here, some type of kanuretzutz, as he says, some broken stick that we can hang our hat on in order to protect us. When we get to such a stage, that will be the stage where the Yatzalah will happen. And this is really the theme in the Haggadah, Rabbotai. When we talk about in the Haggadah, we focus on, yes, the difficulties that we went through and all the stages of a Yadnunu and all the problems that they put us through in the Shibu Mitzrayim, Avadim Ayinu, and we focus on, the tzarot that we went through. And when that happens, but we should focus on, right at the end of all those psukim in the Haggadah, right before the Makot, you know what it says? Vanitzak. And it says, Vanitzak el Hashem Elokeinu. All that led to one thing, our tefillas. The screaming to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And from there it says immediately, Vayotzienu Hashem Mitzrayim. The Vanitzak, that's the theme of the Haggadah. That's the focus. We don't daven because something happened. Something happens in order that we daven. Hashem is looking for those tefillas. He's looking for us to realize, and sometimes we have to get to a stage where we realize there's nowhere else to turn. Yes, you have to realize the severity of the matter, and not to scare us, not to show predictions, not even to show nevuahs to prove Judaism. We don't need that stuff. All we're doing it is for one and sole reason, in order to get to Venitzah, to get to the cries, and those cries will be the harbingers of Mashiach. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky writes in Emet LeYaakov, he writes a beautiful pshat in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Ein ben David ba achi tiashu mina geula. Strange Gemara, cryptic. Ben David only comes when they give up on the Geula, when they give up on it. Says Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, it's one of the third Yud Gimel Ikrim. Of course we know, Afal Pisha Yitma Mea. I'm still waiting. So what do you mean you have to give up on the Geula and that's the only way that Ben David comes? It doesn't make sense. Says Rabbi Yaakov, no, you don't understand. The pshat is that you have to give up any type of understanding that it's going to come in any type of natural way, that we can rely on this person or that person, look to the right and look to the left, or look to some type of protection device. When we give up all those outside areas and we focus on, yes, supporting our Talmidei Chachamim, understanding that it only comes from resting on a Kadosh Baruch Hu, really, really understanding that we are literally surrounded by Nisim here. Those of us who live here in Eretz Yisrael, we hear tzatzot here, left and right, we hear on a constant basis booms and bangs and this, and we know that's it. It's not coming from anything else except for Avinu Shabbat Shamayim. This is the theme of Pesach, the focus of Emunah, and really, really the focus of what real Avdut is. Yes, when Rav Yecheskel asked Rav Yerucham, what is the meaning of Pesach? And he told him Amunah, he told him, you're right, but you know what it really means? To know what a slave is, an Eved. To know how to bend over and say, there is nothing else except for my master. I'm an Eved to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Memimena Yivasheya, whether it's from Persia, Yishmael, whether it's from any type, from the right or the left, it all comes down to Ein lanu lismoich el Elokeinu Shabbat Shamayim. Chag Sameach.